So many of this could look like, you can't really technically scale chaos, but when a lot of best practices are just living in your head, right? This is like solving a crime scene. So if I go to Scott and I'm like, hey, this is the way to do it, and then Chris chimes in and is like, no, you should be doing it this way. He's not knowing what is the right way to do it because it's not written down. And ultimately, in most companies, the lack of clear documentation and structured training just ultimately creates chaos, and it's like a crime scene, right? So new hires often feel lost, they feel overwhelmed, they feel disconnected, and managers were wasting time repeating themselves the same explanations over and over again. You're like using a soup can and a string that you're communicating through, and ultimately tribal knowledge or institutional knowledge within the business stays in people's heads when they leave, right? So all of that foundation, like if Scott left and he hadn't had a stake in building out a lot of these processes that we've built today, like I would be lost, as soon as he would leave. And so we have that foundation. He's been a huge part of that component of building that early on. And ultimately, inconsistent training leads to inconsistent execution and inconsistent customer experience when that's delivered. So I'll say that one more time. Inconsistent training leads to inconsistent execution and inconsistent customer experiences. So what this means for business is slower ramp time equals lost productivity. Confusion, disengagement equates to high turnover, more rehiring costs, and lockup processes equals inefficiency at scale. And so sales is like your moneymaker, right? We are like the keep the lights on in the business. And so regardless if you're an inbound or an outbound business model, you have some form of marketing that helps feed the sales engine that you're building. But if you're not setting them up for success, and you're just kind of like treating those new hires as they're kind of going through your program, and it's kind of this weird mentality of drinking through the fire hose and see what happens. Ultimately, you're just kind of running this hamster wheel and you're never able to kind of get out of that. And so over the past 7 years, I've developed these top 4 principles that have really helped kind of guide as I've been building these teams. Ultimately, I am not a business consultant by any means, and I am not a professional trainer by any means, but I'm speaking from my heart and just telling you a little bit more about the methodology and some of these things that have actually helped, build this machine, since 2018, we're going on, 7 years now. And so I just think it's really, really helpful to think through these top 4 items. So the first one is sink or swim. We've all heard it. I think it's absolute bullshit. I think when you're setting somebody up for failure early on, you give them a handful of paper documents and you're like, do what you need to do with it. And, I'll see you in a couple weeks and see what you've turned it into. That is not a good way to set your team up for success. I will not name any names, but I will say early on in my sales career, it was always like, sit next to so-and-so and show them the ropes, show them how you do it, right? You're just sitting next to somebody. And so you're losing that productivity with your top performer, right? They're trying to get some stuff done. And then all of a sudden you're tasking them to be a trainer. And that's not helpful for anybody. As a leader, you're supposed to provide them the materials that are needed to be successful. And so we'll talk through a little bit more about what that looks like. Organizing your system setup chaos. We all have copious amounts of tech stack, and I know I'm talking about another technical tech stack here is a training program, but we all have ways of how we actually, have our team set up for success. Specifically in sales, there's calendar scheduling tools, there's asynchronous video tools. We're on this webinar, platform, and how do you use it and how do you share your screen? What are the components of how to do it? Having somebody sit down and actually set them up on those processes and click the check boxes and settings and make sure it's all right. You don't need to do it that way. It can be done in an asynchronous format. And that's really helped save us so much time and energy. Automating your training or drown. So again, laying the foundation of a solid training program, and it doesn't have to be perfect out of the gate. Process makes perfect. Yeah, we all say that, but it's just create some sort of foundation so you can iterate on it over time. So when you're hiring new people, and you have some attrition that comes through, which it will happen, ultimately you could just make these fine-tuned refinements along the way, and it makes it so much easier, like where you're not feeling like you have to reinvent the wheel every single time somebody starts, and like that's just going to be such a time suck for you and your managers. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. Lastly, embrace the pivot, right? So we all have strategic business changes that happen. Ultimately, I think sales is at the brunt of a lot of that, because when pricing and packaging changes, those conversations change. Your go-to-market strategies, if you have new products or new features that you're trying to sell, and making sure that the value propositions are in line with what your reps are communicating with. But how you do that is really, really, really important. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. All right. So first things first, sink or swim is BS, because you can set somebody up with a 30, 60, 90. This is just a quick snapshot of what we've done here at Trainual. It's a Google Doc. It's really simple. And I won't beat a dead horse over this, but if you're trying to create something new and you don't necessarily know where to start, if you're trying to create a new role in sales, we just, started trying to do some more outbound stuff, but like you could create a 30, 60, 90, 120, who cares what that is, but have something formally written down. And a lot of this could be emulated from the job description that you've had people apply for and that you've actually ultimately hired from. So you're just bringing that continuity in those conversations as they get started in the business and they get indoctrinated into your culture. Setting the expectation of like how we do things here. Month one, really be intentional. After that 30 days, check back in with them. I have 2 things that I'll call out here. They're fully completed in their training content. I added a note to like call out recommendations, so we can make sure that this is a collaborative effort if something feels like it's out of date. Little quick plug on Trainual as a software. We just added like commenting and collaboration. It's been honestly a game changer, because some of that stale content, you're constantly looking for somebody to like flag it to you on Slack or Teams or, through an email, whatever that may be. And it's been so helpful from the bottom up approach of people being like, hey, this looks, off, and go in, make a quick update. It's so helpful when you're hiring new people. Lastly, it's like convert your first account. I was talking to Scott before we got into this webinar, and I am a terrible liar. So I was like, I want to say so bad that every single new sales hire I brought on board has converted their first account. There has been one that has not. So I'm just saying that up front. But 99% of the people that have come through our training program have been successful and have converted their first account. And ultimately, that just provides you an opportunity to look back and say, hey, what were you not getting out of your training content, and why weren't you able to meet that expectation? It's okay to have those conversations. Month 2, set their quotas, set their conversion percentages. Again, like KPIs, set realistic expectations. Don't like give them the top of the mountain of where they should be at, and like they're trying to like chase that. It's not fair, and you want to really want to make sure it's like a toe step into being fully productive. But again, realistic expectations makes a big difference when you're hiring somebody new. If they've never been in sales, or if it's somebody that's more tenured, even some of the best sales reps like that come in, like a lot of your processes internally are different. And so you really want to set those clear expectations. And then ultimately, by their 90 days, they should be fully ramped, ready to hit month 4, carrying at least 80% to quota. So with this 30, 60, 90, it's 2 weeks to onboard. They're engaging with prospects by week 3 after their training, and they feel fully like aware and indoctrinated in the Trainual lingo and language, and they can talk the talk and walk the walk and do the demo. But by week 4, they have won their first deal. Okay. Obviously, there should be a place where this is visibly documented, their roles, responsibilities, like what they do, what they're responsible for in the business. In Trainual, we have a responsibility builder, so it's really easy to be clear with that, and everybody in the company has access to seeing this. So again, if you're ambiguous and you're vague with what success looks like in their role, you're giving your employees the least amount of chance to succeed, aka they will sink, especially where KPIs and sales matter the most. All right, you still with me? Okay. Really basic stuff, but easy going. The next component.
I think it's important though. I mean, I don't know how many times we've been in situations where when we first started specifically, and we're bringing on salespeople and even service people, and we didn't really have a process in place, and someone's having to kind of guesswork how to do things, even as a tenured person. So
yeah, totally. It goes back to that mentality. And so I think, again, you can make stuff up, but you can have those check-ins, those like every 30 days along the way, and then you can refine that over time. It doesn't have to be like perfect from the get-go. And like if that 30 days you're not meeting the mark, then you continue that into their 60 days so they can hit those expectations. Okay. So your system setup organization, this is huge. And I talked a little bit about that early on of like sitting next to so-and-so and, walking through these systems or see how they do it. It's just, it's so tedious and it's exhausting on the individual contributor. Scott, I've never made you do that here, I hope. But I've really kind of brought that into this culture that I really want to make sure that they're set up for success. This is an unprompted feedback from our recent new hire that's joined the team. She's actually currently on maternity leave, and we miss her so much. But when she sent this to me, I was like, oh, yay, my training's working. It's so good. And she was so happy because she had joined other sales teams, and it was just kind of like trying to figure things out on the fly, like I mentioned earlier on. But like, this is just a small component of the tech stack that we use here. And I don't need to go through all the different logos, but again, there's all these different ways and all these different settings of how you use these systems to make your organization unique. And you can make sure that they're intentional with how they set that up. And what content is that? It's our internal, this is called our sales general processes. It is the most repeatable processes that our team uses. And that's where I make most of my updates. And I'm not lying when I say I'm probably in our training platform, making some tweaks and iterations at least like every 2 weeks. I would say like as of late, it's been once a week, just making a quick tweak, just in alignment when we make some changes. But I'll show you a quick example. So HubSpot, again, it's a monster, type of tool. So is Salesforce. So whatever CRM you're using, your data will be moot if you don't have people set it up and are doing the same thing consistently. I have a team of, over 13 sellers right now. And it's like, if people aren't putting in the information, we can't make strategic informed decisions that that the data is telling us that something is off or something that we need to make some adjustments. So the more clear you can document the processes, the more your reps can be informed and armed with what they need to know to do their best work. A little bit more on the inside of the meat and potatoes in this process. So I just wanted to show you kind of a snapshot, but like your processes don't have to be like crazy robust, but I personally hate a ton of wall of text, and it makes it a lot easier to review information in different kind of bite-sized chunks of processes. And you can see like I've kind of like hacked our steps, and I'll be like, this is a to-do, like add the HubSpot extension. So you're using it the right way. This is the area call to action to add like the little asterisks and make sure the box are checked and this box isn't checked. I love this. There's a Giphy system that's called Droppler. Chris introduced it to me really, really early on, our founder, and I love it. DROPLR. You can create like little quick GIFs of how to do something instead of having to create like a full like meat and potatoes video. It makes a big difference when you're just like, click here, do this, move on. And so obviously we love Loom too. All right. Erica, again, throughout this process, she's just validating me along the way. So I just had to throw that in there. Being so organized. Okay. And then we kind of get into automating your training, right? So we talked about the 30, 60, 90. We talked about setting up your systems in a super high level, like impactful, like async process, right? But this is kind of how your reps can be confident at scale that you're setting them up for success. So once you have your training foundation laid, and in Trainual, we have like training paths. So it's really easy to not like assign them a ton of content, or I don't know if you're, at your office and you have like a stack of binders of stuff that people have to go through, but like drinking through the fire hose is a term we all know too well in sales, or for any job for that matter. But I think ultimately making sure that they're going through like the mission, vision, core values, all of the basic stuff that they need to know when they're talking the language, and they have a really good understanding of what the culture is like, then they start kind of getting into their actual departmental processes. And so that's where it becomes really important to establish the foundation, and then you train on those clear processes. And then automation just in general is key overall when you're scaling. So you have your content ready, you have the foundation established, and you just make those tweaks because, hey, like 2 weeks from now, I'm going to hire a new